left on 66?
I think so. I marked it.
Yeah, okay. Section 10,
Yeah.
question 67.
Mm-hmm.
Who's reading the mission statement this morning?
Mr. Dominguez.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning. We are back from recess. This is, the time is 9:01, and today is Friday, December 10th, 2021. This is day 2 of the Physical Therapy Board of California board meeting, and we are meeting at the Department of Consumer Affairs hearing room located at 2005 Evergreen Street in Sacramento. Could we please have roll call?
Alicia Amen.
I'm here.
Katarina Ellaby. Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian.
Present.
All members are present with the exception of Katarina Ellaby, Jonathan Irvin, and Dale Armstrong, and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. And can we please have the reading of the board's mission statement by Dr. Jesus Dominguez?
Certainly, Madam President. The mission of the Physical Therapy Board of California is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you. And we will begin this morning with agenda item number 13, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. So I'd like to call now for any public comment. And we have none today, and so I'd like to go back to agenda item number 5 from yesterday and resume reviewing the sunset review, and I'll hand it to Jason Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam President. So just a correction, we'll be working off of agenda number 14 and 15. That's essentially the same topics from yesterday, but agendized for day. We knew
Thank
that
you.
we were going to have a large workload and split it over 2 days. So
Thank you.
picking up where we left off from yesterday, we're now at section 10, question number 67, which is in reference to items as they pertain to the global pandemic. So question 67 is in response to COVID-19, has the board implemented telework policies for employees and staff? As the board's aware, we certainly have very early on in the pandemic. Mobility and our ability to work remotely was accounted for in our move from our smaller suite to our larger suite. So our timing was pretty good considering there was a pandemic looming. Staff was able to adjust to mobile workstations at home a little bit easier. We had transitioned to all laptops and those kind of things. Implemented some new technology with Microsoft Teams, which allowed us to take phone calls from afar. Those kind of things. And so this paragraph here kind of measures out a little bit of the history, not just for us, but also for the Department of Consumer Affairs, some of the requirements that we had to adhere to as part of the governor's exemption orders or executive orders, and even a reopening plan that was shared department-wide. And so if you have any questions about 67, I'm happy to entertain them.
No questions.
Question number 68, in response to COVID-19, has the board utilized any existing state of emergency statutes? The only state of emergency statute really that affected the PTBC was the California Emergency Medical Services Authority granted out-of-state licensees who met criteria temporary authorization to work, and provided us almost monthly with reports of out-of-state licensees coming into California to practice under that emergency order. That notice that we receive is essentially just to let us know should we receive any kind of calls, complaints, or concerns, and that particular person doesn't show up in our roster. If we look at the EMSA roster, there may be an exception for that. Moving to 69. Pursuant to the governor's executive order, has the board worked on any waiver requests for the department? There were a few main waivers that affected us. Most importantly, and probably the most impactfully, is the continuing education waiver that essentially breaks down to if you expired anytime between March 31st and October 31st of 2022, or March of 2021 through October 31st. I'm sorry, March of 2020 through October 31st of 2022. You now have until January 31st to come into compliance with your continuing competency requirements. DCA number 20-02 is the reinstatement of licensure. This allowed licenses and canceled statuses for less than 6 months to be able to reinstate and come back into practice. This one didn't really affect us too much. If they're in canceled status, they've been expired for much longer. So the examination requirement for continuing physical therapy treatment and direct access was extended and now expires December 31st of this year. And as we'll talk about it a little bit later on in a different section, we've identified that possibly as an issue moving forward, that we make that a permanent exception. Essentially an amendment to the 2620.1 code where we can just remove the words in person to allow for a little bit of latitude and the ability to use technology such as telehealth. Lastly, the DCA waiver extending time to satisfy examination requirements. This was, its intent was allow applicants to have a little bit more time to sit for exams if they were running into logistical issues or exam availability, delays, maybe wasn't available in their area, so on. And that also expires, or has expired, I believe, October 31st.
Do the subsections below pertain just to that particular waiver or to everything above? A, B, C, D.
I believe those could be moved above the waivers. They apply to all of them, the above, and so we provide an answer to each one. All the requests that we provided to the Director's Office, Department of Consumer Affairs, were approved. None are pending. We didn't have any denials. We didn't ask for a lot of waivers to begin with. We were pretty mindful for the types of waivers that we asked for. And then the reasons for each of the different requests, and we just direct them to please, look above to see the explanation for the waiver itself.
Well, they know what they're looking for, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I just want to remind staff and public, if you have anything to add, please come forward. You're welcome to join in.
Moving on to 70, in response to COVID-19, has the board taken any other steps or implemented any other policies regarding licensees and consumers? The only thing in addition to what was stated above is that the FSBPT extended the fixed examination dates. In some instances, instead of having them on a specific day, they did it almost a week range. And so that allowed for a little bit greater flexibility for the applicants in scheduling their location of preference or what was closest to them. I know it was an accommodation that was greatly appreciated by the applicants. It did allow for a lot more people to get into the exam and be, unhindered in their application process. '71, has the board recognized any necessary statutory revisions, updates, or changes? we touch on, we would certainly like to see a change to the Open Meetings Act to allow meetings to continue to be conducted online using platforms such as Webex. Even though we would be outside of a state of emergency, we think that that additional layer of, or at least another point of contact, will increase a greater amount of engagement with stakeholders, making it much more accessible for them.
Can you talk about that last sentence a little more, please?
The change in Open Meeting Act being a cost savings.
It would protect PTBC staff members and public.
So one of the reasons that we want to remain or have the ability to use online platforms, there's a couple benefits to that. One is, I think there's a hesitation still in some of our communities for folks to come out and engage publicly in person kind of meetings. And then anytime that we can kind of decrease the actual points of contact, I think that's a protective measure that's important. But in doing so, I don't want to hinder that person's ability to participate in the process either. So Webex can provide them that protection while still providing them that access. But I think that protection also applies to staff and you as members as well.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm on board 100%. I'm just wondering if that particular clause will, warrant any more questions of the meaning.
So two things. I see what you're saying. We could go into a little bit further explanation, but I'd also be happy to have those conversations.
Yes.
So if there's something there that they would like to ask me about,
Yeah.
this is one of those topics where I think a lot of conversations should be had between now and the hearing, so that we have ample opportunity to try and convince the legislature of just how valuable WebEx is, and that we see it as an addition, not a replacement to an existing system, right? That our intent is to still get out there on the road and rub elbows with the stakeholders, licensees, applicants, and consumers, and making ourselves accessible based on the mandate to both Northern California and Southern California. And not to be misunderstood in that we would just WebEx from a conference room somewhere in a state building for the next few years until the global pandemic comes to an end. We'd like them to be seen as complementary of each other.
Yeah, I like that strategy.
Could I also, I totally agree with that, but would it be possible for us to add a little description to the beginning, to the first sentence, as it reads, PTBC would welcome a change to the Open Meeting Act to allow meetings to continue to be conducted via an online platform. I know it's sort of an additional resource. Maybe we just want to make sure that they understand that the ask is not that we want these meetings exclusively to be held, but
Sure.
just a couple of words.
I think when we address this a little bit later on in the report, we do just that, where we're very clear and we've kind of reworked that language, because I want to avoid with staffers or committee members any perception that, we're looking at limiting the services that we provide by implementing this WebEx service. We think that it's an addition to, and so in the sections further down, we go into it in much greater detail.
Okay.
So I actually am a little, the way that the end of the first sentence reads, so that this is an option for PTBC to use at any time. That kind of implies, we're gonna do this so that we don't have to travel, and we don't have to be in a place where people, to me, that's the way that reads off the cuff.
Yeah.
And maybe to say, an option for PTBC to use when necessary.
We're happy to make those changes. I just want to,
Something- yeah.
just a point of clarity is that I'm also kind of hedging my bets. Further down in the report, we're actually going to recommend that the BMP committees apply an online platform as an additional mandate to our existing meeting authority.
Yeah.
Having said that, that's specific to us. But the change that has to actually occur is statewide, right, to the
Right.
Open Meetings Act itself. And so in this question, I think we're kind of trying to take the opportunity to say, this is what we want at our bare minimum. right? Because even though we're outside of a state of emergency, we'd still like to have the ability to meet on a web platform such as Webex.
But so what this is missing, I mean, I understand that you're saying it's further explained down below, but because you're making this statement now, I think there needs to be a little bit something else here. And what we've noticed that there's greater accessibility via Webex for members of the public to be able to participate. It greatly allows for more participation by the public to be able to access the meetings via technology.
So it's really essentially just a replacement of the SO, right? Just we would like to have this via an online platform so that we can increase engagement with the public and provide a greater means of access as opposed to how it benefits us directly or how we might use it. Okay.
And not just so that we can do it, but so that we can continue the greater outreach or the significantly greater outreach that the WebEx platform has provided, because we've noticed that we've noticed that more people were participating than what we have at a regular on-site meeting kind of thing.
I'm wondering for this particular question, if we left this intact but changed the language of the first sentence, so that this is an option for the PTBC to use when necessary. I don't know, would that help? Instead of to use at any time? Because that kind of gets to, we're not going to use this all the time, we're going to use it when necessary. And then
I led with that, I think.
Yeah.
But I think a bigger part of it too is that not just when it's necessary for us or when it's convenient for us because something's up with us, but I think the bigger issue is the accessibility and availability for participation by the public who cannot attend.
Yeah, we can add that in.
And even though we have our mandate for North and South, like that's our own thing, and we don't have to wait for. Or somebody who's in the South doesn't have to wait until we're down there, until we're in the South, to be able to attend a meeting because they can't get to it. Now, with WebEx, they can attend a meeting at any time. They can be able to be part of it, and they can. And I mean, I think that is the huge opportunity to take advantage of.
I have a question, Dr. Drummond, and I agree with you. So in that context, it sounds like if the current language says to use at any time, in other words, discretionary when deemed necessary, but is the intention to ultimately be able to have a physical in-person meeting in addition to that, kind of make it standard practice to also broadcast via WebEx?
That takes away the when necessary. That addresses the when necessary part, right? So it depends on which part we're looking at. If we want to make it two-pronged, if we want to say we want to be able to use it when necessary because of availability of board members or whatever needs to happen with a meeting. But then another aspect that we've noticed with this is the enhanced ability for the public to attend, to be able to participate.
So I guess it would be my recommendation to avoid the when necessary or use at any time, because the intent is to apply this as an additional layer, right? Ultimately as a strategy. So I have proposed language that the sentence for the most part in the beginning remains the same. We would welcome a change to the Open Meetings Act to allow meetings to continue to be conducted via an online platform, so that we can continue to provide an online platform. So that we can continue to provide what has proven to be an increase in stakeholder access and engagement.
I think that's the better way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's about that.
yeah. I mean, even with the original language, if we just changed PTBC to public, so that this is an option for the public to use at any time, not just us. Yeah.
Mm.
Even when not in a state of emergency. So I like your language.
Yeah, that's good.
Do you want me to read it back again?
Yes, please.
Yeah, can you read it one more time, please? Thank you.
Yes, the PTPC would welcome a change to the Open Meeting Act to allow meetings to continue to be conducted via an online platform so that we can continue to provide what has proven to show an increase in stakeholder access and engagement.
Mm-hmm. Even when California's not in a state of emergency, or take that out?
I think even when California is a state of emergency kind of is counter to our argument, right? It's more than just that. We're
Yep.
looking at making this just a permanent access point.
Yep.
It's time to come into the 21st century.
Yeah. And then I think that that last sentence still works well now. This change to the Open Meeting Act will result in cost savings to the PTBC while protecting staff members and members of the public.
Thank you.
And so Brooke has that captured on the screen. That will be, edited in part of the amendment where we ask for that delegated authority. So we're good with section 10. We're going to move on to section 11. Okay. Section 11 is the board action responses to prior sunset issues. So taking a look back at 2016 at what was done and updates to those particular items. Issue number one is the request to update our fee statute. We describe a bit of history here, but also trying to kind of expand on that, the reason why we're asking for a fee statute, and trying to be very clear that we're not asking for a fee increase at this time. We ran into this in the last sunset thinking that it was an opportune time to increase our caps, even though we had a very positive kind of outlook on the fund condition at that point and moving forward. But we knew that if we ever came across any kind of unforeseen circumstances, whether it be a financial crisis with the state of California or a lawsuit or any kind of unintended or unexpected costs in IT, that we were at our statutory caps and there was absolutely no way for us to increase our revenues. And so we asked during the last sunset. I do think that there was some kind of confusion during sunset as to whether we needed an increase in cap or just a fee increase at all. And I only say that because the advice given back to us was to fill out a worksheet that has to do with increasing your fees. And so, the confusion was, again, we're not asking to increase our fees at this time, just the authority, the level of trust that the legislature has in the board, and provide us with a little leeway in our statutory authority in the situation where we might actually have to increase the fees. So we've done that again here. And again, we're trying to be very clear that we're not asking for a fee increase. And we have taken two fees in particular that we think, we did increase all of our fees during the last round. I think for this ask, we're only asking for a change in the statutory authority for the renewal fee, as well as the initial licensing fee, which is essentially the first contribution to the fund that a licensee makes. So it's almost like their renewal, just no re in front of it. So, and we asked from that to go from 150 to 250, and the renewal authority to go from 300 to 500. And then a brief explanation that should this be granted in sunset, a reassurance that any fee increase would still require promulgation of regulation, which involves a number of level of approvals as well as stakeholder feedback and public input, that we can't just increase the fees as we see fit. questions with issue 1? Issue 2 is a little bit simpler. At the time of sunset, we had partly promulgated language to create a retired, or at least the system or processes for a retired status based on a statutory authority in our own practice act. Though during the process, we had become aware of a bill that was written department-wide that had a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more authority for the boards to take advantage of. So we tabled that regulation, and we identified an issue with that particular authority in our practice act and asked the BMP committee to sunset that statute so that we could take advantage of the general provision that had recently been passed and that the two would not conflict with each other. We consider this matter resolved as the committee did grant that authority, and we did sunset the 2600 code for retired status and now can rely on the general provision code 464. And we are currently, as the board's aware, promulgating a retired status regulation. And so we're not asking for any kind of assistance from the BMP committee at this point, so we consider this issue resolved. Any questions on that one? Issue number 3 is even simpler. As a result of SB 198, we realized that there were some statutory references that needed to be amended and corrected. And so through that process in 16, we did ask for those. They were given to us. Those corrections were made. And so again, we consider this issue to be resolved. Issue number 4 is the English proficiency exemption. And as the members are aware, we did ask for a legislative change that would allow for an exemption for those that were were educated in English-speaking countries. And so they did grant this. And again, this is another issue that we consider to be resolved as a result of that accommodation by the committee. Issue number 5 is the treatment plan of care for children covered under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. As the members might remember, this was a hot topic for us for a little while, where we were trying to solve an issue where a practitioner operating in a healthcare team in the education system could find themselves not having access to an actual medical diagnosis, and it was kind of difficult sometimes to track one down in that the bureaucracy of that process. Some of our licensees were using direct access as a means to kind of extend that out, which wasn't really the intended purpose for direct access. But we did, along with the California Physical Therapy Association, have conversations with the BMP committee and their staffers, providing alternatives and texts and that kind of thing. And that solution was provided to a CPTA-backed bill that was AB 2423 that essentially changed the language to give an exemption to those operating in a healthcare team in education. And so we consider that also to be resolved. Any questions on that one? All right, going to section 12, which is new issues. We have some kind of repetition going on because our very first issue number 1 is, issue number 1 is going back to the waiver extensions that we were touched on earlier, the director of the Department of Consumer Affairs provided to us. And one of those waivers changes the wording in the language and removes the requirement of an in-person consultation with a physician or surgeon after a physical therapy consumer has exceeded or met or exceeded its 12 days or 12 visits or 45 days, whichever comes first. Early on into the pandemic, we identified that this would be a possible roadblock, if you will, for consumers to receive services. We knew anecdotally that physicians and doctors and physical therapists, for that matter, their time and the number of calls that they were taking created traffic jam, and it might be very difficult for a PT to get, or a PT consumer to get an actual face-to-face appointment with their doctor just to sign off on their plan of care. And so we made a recommendation to remove the words in person at that time, so that those sign-offs could be done by telemedicine means, anything else the physician or surgeon deemed appropriate at that point. And so we think moving forward that this is more about kind of removing a piece of language that was based on technology at the time, and not so much incorporating a telemedicine model. So this is an issue that we worked on with the subcommittee as well, and kind of polished out the language a little bit so that they could try to make it as easy to understand as possible. Should this issue be addressed with the committee, one of the things that we would just recommend in conversation with staffers is, to what extent does this actual statute need to be changed to effectuate and provide us with the outcome we're looking for? And we believe it's just the removal of the words in person, that it leaves the flexibility in the language for doctors or physicians and physical therapists, for that matter, to communicate via electronic means, whatever they may be, telephonic, video, phone, that kind of thing, so that we don't have to put an interrupt in the plan of care or the progress of that particular physical therapy consumer.
Quick question, sir. Totally agree with what you just stated, but as I read the last paragraph or the bottom paragraph in that issue 1 waiver extension permanent, the way it reads, so we requesting that Physical Therapy Practice Act be amended to eliminate in-person patient examination and evaluation. Can we just make it clear to everybody that the ask is just to eliminate the term in person and not to eliminate in-person patient examination and evaluation?
Absolutely.
Maybe quotes or just some call out.
And then because we're including this statement to say in person, in quotes or however we want to identify it, patient examination evaluation by a physician or surgeon or person otherwise authorized, something, so that it's not, because it almost reads that it would be eliminating the in-person examination evaluation by the physical therapist.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that that's not, because that could be presumed just by reading that without that clarification.
I agree with those two edits.
So just a proposed sentence then. The PTPC respectfully requests BPC section 2620.1 of the Physical Therapy Practice Act be amended to eliminate the in-person requirement of the patient examination and evaluation by a physician or surgeon.
And is there anybody else in the list who's able to provide a medical diagnosis?
Unfortunately, in 2620.1, physician or surgeon for direct access, that's the language quoted from 2620.
Yeah.
Physician would be considered a physician, yes.
So nurse practitioners and physician assistants.
Would not be.
Okay.
And I believe that was the intent at the time when temporary direct access was crafted. Are we good with that particular amendment? Okay.
Do you think all of the language, including the prior paragraphs, make it clear that it's just the in-person requirement, but there's still an evaluation requirement?
That one's hard for me because there's a certain bias
Mm-hmm.
in my knowledge set, so I do try to read it from like an audience perspective. I think in some instances it may be maybe beneficial for the reader, to look at those particular statutes to have an understanding of what surrounds this. But in conversation with the committee and the staffers, I think we'll have more than an opportunity to describe what the problem is and how simple the remedy can be.
Okay.
Were you able to capture that? Okay. So then issue number 2 is, one thing I will say about some of the issues that we're bringing up this year as opposed to prior sunsets is I could define some of these as just kind of nice to have. So they're things that the board would like to have, but they're not necessarily here to put out fires. Maybe with the extension of in-person, I think that's something that would definitely benefit the consumer. Number 2 is essentially the Physical Therapy Board asking the legislature to impose upon the Physical Therapy Board an additional requirement in their meeting authority, which is providing an online platform for the public to engage through, such as Webex. And in that ask, in conversations already had, we want to make sure that it's clear to the staffers and to the committee itself that we're not looking for something to replace our existing processes. We're not looking for something to do in lieu of or during a global pandemic or anything like that. We're asking that in support of the idea of amending Bagley-Keene and the Open Meetings Act to, one, just come into a modern era and account for existing technology, but two, that when we are traveling Southern California or the Bay Area, that we're still providing online access for those folks who aren't able to travel. And that online access would also allow them more of an opportunity to engage, not just view in like they would from our existing webcasts. Any question or concern with issue 2?
The final clause, and is more effective than a teleconference. It's hitting me a little bit, and I don't know that it's necessary. I understand that it's
So staff,
there's an intention to somehow indicate that use of modern technology as opposed to
and this was a conference point with staff, is that you could end that sentence with broader platform functionality and features, period. And I'm completely okay with that. I think what we were trying to do with and is more effective than is just to kind of contrast the difference between those two. But I think we can do that in conversation also.
Okay. Or maybe opening with the PTBC believes that requiring the use of modern technology, current day technology, such as an online platform.
It helps as well. And like I said, when we get to the committee level and we're having those conversations,
Yeah.
I'll be happy to have those conversations. And just, I mean, I think at this point I have a fairly good car salesman pitch down this particular one. And I like the addition of modern day. So we're good with issue number 2. We can move to 3.
Yes.
Okay. Executive officer exempt level increase. The board's familiar. Historically, we have made 3 different attempts to try and reclassify the executive officer's position to account for changes in time, complexity, money, licensing population, employees, all of those different factors. And so at the recommendation of staff and at the recommendation of the subcommittee for the Sunset Report, this issue was brought up in the last 2 meetings. And so we've provided information here that essentially is asking the committee or the legislature if there is anything that they can do to assist us in completing that process and bringing that position around to something that's appropriate given the board size and structure.
Again, apparently I'm in the mood for modifiers today. Perhaps the exempt level has been changed only twice since 1988. Just to, that there's only been in 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like just the crux of it is despite our multiple attempts over the last 5 years now to be appropriately classified. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, that's really like, we've tried and tried and tried and tried. Now we're coming to you.
I think staff has done a good job with essentially mapping out not mapping out and just quantifying the efforts, but also putting them kind of in a chronological order so that the committee and its staffers can see just how long this particular effort has been happening and to what extent, how often we were meeting about it, that kind of thing. And so I think, you know, splitting it out into these kind of fiscal years and just the content behind each paragraph paints the picture very nicely for staffers to kind of understand what's going on. I also know, just in a public sense, that they are very aware of an issue department-wide for the Department of Consumer Affairs with the executive officer's position. So much so that we went ahead and had a third party and independent non-biased analysis done that identified some of these same issues. So the legislature is aware. I do think this is the first time that I'm aware of that we're bringing it to their attention as an item in Sunset. And so I think being able to kind of map out that history and the progress definitely demonstrates that the board took every reasonable step that they possibly could before coming to this extent. And again, it's another one of those where we'll be happy to have that conversation with staffers, and we may, you know, have to call on the board president frequently during that period of communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do want to acknowledge staff's work, particularly Liz's work in putting this timeline together. And I know we'll talk more about it later in the meeting, but it's a lot of work, and you laid it out very, very nicely. Thank you for doing that for us.
The only unfinished business in that particular question item is in the highlight, and that is as an outcome to whatever happens later today, we have an agenda item about this very same topic.
Yeah.
And so whatever the outcome is from that agenda item, we will go back into this report and archive it.
My other concern is one that we have talked about in the past quite a bit, and that is this being the EO exempt level. And so there's been, I think, focus from, you know, above us on EO salary.
Mhm.
And yes, the board is concerned about not being classified appropriately so that we can actually, you know, compensate our executive officer. Any future PTBC board can compensate any future or current EO officer appropriately. And that's a concern, but the size of the board, the budget, just everything that goes along with it. I mean, the name of this is executive officer level increase, but it's so much more than that. We just need to be classified appropriately.
The package speaks to the issues that are created by the misallocation of that top tier level and how it impacts the positions below it. And I think the board, even throughout this long history of requests, has been very clear in keeping the two issues separate, that this isn't about the person who sits in the position. This is only about the position and if it is allocated proportionately to the board and its structure.
Yeah.
So
Thank
I think
you.
that's, and I think we would, it's a very difficult conversation to have sometimes because we slip back into the person that sits in that seat, their performance, the salary they've made over time, that kind of thing, when this is really only about the allocated position itself.
Yeah. So the highlighted language will change depending on what happens next.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it'd be simply as, you know, if the board makes another request, we'll list it in the highlight that we once again made a request.
Other board comments or discussion? We will get to this in another agenda item, but for the sunset report specifically. Any public or staff comment? Yes.
I'm sorry, Madam President. Just a minor suggestion on the very, I know we're beating the dead horse here, but the last little section reads, request evidence, to review its requests and evidence to provide the PTBC with changing its EO exempt level to a level appropriate to meet its current organizational structure. Can we just give one more shout out to, it's not just, you know, increased demands, increased operational needs, one last qualifier before current organizational to meet its increasing operational demands, so that it reads that it's not just the current organizational structure, but it's the demands around the, you know, the PTBC's operational needs, I guess.
Yeah, they continue to change.
So I understand to meet its organizational structure, but it's really the needs, the demands, the requirements, the operational processes. I don't really have any language suggestion, but, and it reads fine the way it is. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Mm-hmm. Just add and.
And please, that would be it, please.
Does that get to the spirit of what you're thinking though? Yeah.
Please.
So, increasing operational requirements and current organizational structure.
Of the current organizational structure? I don't know.
So what I did was kind of the opposite a little bit, and I'll just read it to see if it makes sense. I haven't quite completed it, but to a level appropriate to meet its current organizational structure, which has increased exponentially in complexity, size, and the word that is missing on the end for me is some kind of budgetary authority or the finance side of things. And so we'll have to figure out what that word is.
Complexity, size.
Yeah, in the first paragraph, we have scope of responsibility, budget, complexity, special requirements.
So we just repeat those words
Yeah,
here.
we can do that. It's always good because it's so lengthy. We can go there and repeat it again at the end. Kind of here. Remind them of what we're asking. Why?
It's funny as we, Jesus says, beat this horse to death. Staff and I have gone round and round in these conversations, and we had we have a member of staff with us that has been around long enough to know, or at least remember when this board only had 5 staff, right? And so that falls in that range of when the EO classification has been looked at. So I think exponentially is a really good word. It just at 1 year to the next, it grows and it compounds, and even the growth compounds upon the growth. So we'll use the language from above that talks about scope of responsibility, staff size, budget, and that kind of thing.
I'm a little leery of in the paragraph right above the last one, based on the last assessments by the board in 2017. I don't know if including the year. I mean, I understand but rephrasing that somehow, because it makes it look like we haven't done any new assessments. We're still going on data from 2017. And
Right. And really, after today's conversation, will no longer be true.
right. And so it doesn't carry, to me, it doesn't carry as much weight. It's like, oh, you're basing it on that stuff.
Can we say since 2016, the board has made several attempts, numerous attempts? I've lost
It's
count at how
simple.
many attempts we've made.
I know.
It's simple at that point. I mean, it's simple and clear.
Yeah. Or repeated attempts.
Again,
Repeated attempts. Repeated, yeah. Repeated attempts.
Innumerable. We can't count that high.
incalculable.
Exempt level,
Infinity.
So if we're good with those edits, the next one is new issues that were not previously just.
Oh, wait. What did we just, was it repeated?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Would you like it read back?
No,
Okay.
I said okay.
Any public or staff comment? Okay.
The next two are there any new issues previously not discussed in the report? And there aren't any. And new issues raised by the committee is we won't know those until we've actually heard back from this report. So, Section 13 are the attachments. This portion is kind of ministerial. The members are familiar with the board's administrative manual. You have copies. We will include that same manual here. The current organizational charts showing the relationship of committees to the board and membership. We have a very small Visio chart because we don't utilize too many committees here, so it'll just list the board and then box out those 2 members that have participated in the EO exempt level subcommittee. We don't have any major studies to report. And then D, the year-end organizational charts for staff over the last 4 fiscal years. I think we'll be including here because it's asked for in the report, but you'll also see that it's included in the exempt level justifications also, just to demonstrate growth of the board as it pertains to staff size. And then we've moved the enforcement and licensing performance measures down here for the ease of publication and the ease of readers to access and use. So we will have PDF pages with the data that is brought off of DCA's web portal for the informant's performance measures for the last, well, since the duration of the sunset report, and those will be included here as well. And then that's it.
Okay. Not bad. Went through all day yesterday and an hour this morning, and so shall we go back to the top?
Yep, we do have some stuff to start with from the top, and I think we'll just start from the beginning. I think we have plenty of time at this point. So some of the edits that we were making yesterday were done in real time. Staff and I worked in the evening and incorporated those edits, but there were some edits that still needed some wordsmithing and reworking, and we'll go through those now and bring them to your attention. So one of the things that we added to the acronym table was OA, or Occupational Analysis. And if you guys find any other acronyms that you think should be added outside of that 4.5-page document, please let us know. Yeah, there we go. The next major item is we reworked the board member attendance, and we changed it to board meeting attendance. We indicated who you are as board members. We changed the dates to match the fiscal years now. And we did find that we internally had a little confusion as to the dark gray and light gray. And so keeping in mind that the board positions are fixed calendar positions, and that board members' attendance coming in and out of those fixed positions is dynamic. And so you may not come in at the very beginning, you might come in 2 years in. So as an example, you see the top, Dr. Alviso having her last meeting in fiscal year 2017-18, and that position then became vacant. That position is the same position that Dr. Armstrong has come into. So you also see that vacant there until she gets those last 3 blocks of attendance once her appointment was made.
Much better.
And so we know we have the raw data here and it's demonstrating properly. And really aesthetically, I think it still looks better.
Yeah.
We'll see what PD&E does to it to kind of clear it up a little bit, make it more ADA accessible, so on and so forth.
So I like how you placed Dr. Armstrong underneath Dr. Alviso. And
The same thing happens, almost the same thing happens with, like as an example, Mr. Watkins' position being taken over by
yes,
Mr. Irvin's.
yes,
And so you can, those are two pretty good
yes.
points to where you can see that how well it works. The other thing that I would say to this, and we all talked about this last night, there's kudos to be given to Dr. Alicia Rubina Amen and for Dr. Drummer for perfect attendance through the duration of this sunset.
Thank you. And I mean, overall, we've got good attendance, right?
I have no qualms or issues with attendance. Attendance is one of the things that I kind of brag about when it comes to this board. So we don't have attendance issues.
Nice.
They're a very committed board.
Yes, Dr. Drummer?
Did you get your silver star?
Yes. I did. Thank you for staying after hours, staff, and working on this. It looks much better. Reads much easier. And it looks like the dates at the top, they're hard to read, but it looks like they're now in chronological order.
They are.
Yeah.
So the new chart is the one we'd like you to accept today, and then we'll go ahead and delete the old chart.
Yes. Yes.
And then that footnote, we have a footnote that indicates that Dr. Dale Armstrong is actually serving in her grace period right now.
Mm.
Just to bring it to the attention,
Okay.
even though it's outside of the parameters of the Sunset Report, we thought it was worth mentioning. And so then we go down further and we have the roster and the appointing powers chart. And so we made some changes there as well. And again, once we have this kind of proofed by PD&E, some of the formatting of these charts may be changed just to create more uniformity, but also make it easier to understand, easier to take in.
Yeah, it looks good.
The next comment was based on an ask, I believe, by Dr. Drummer to add in some rationale that indicates the level N position that the exempt level status was given a few years back to support the AEO. But when we discussed it and we took it back to the table, actually the two didn't occur in sequence that way. So the move to N was, or the creation of the AEO wasn't as a result of the move to N. The creation of the AEO position was a result of the addition of a third manager. So once we brought a manager position online for the applications and licensing unit and separated it from admin, having three managers necessitated the SSM2 AEO position. And I think we addressed the compaction concern in other areas of the exempt level question. So we didn't make a change in here.
I think I was the one who brought that up. And so this question isn't really asking or does not include the possibility of discussing exempt level.
Not in the way the question is phrased
Yeah.
here. This is more of what has happened.
Yeah,
And
internally.
then we
Yeah.
have an opportunity, later on through some of the other questions to bring it up as an issue.
Thank you.
And then scheduling, so going through, I believe it's 18 of 94.
Mine says 10, oh, 18, yes.
Okay. So in the regulatory report, one of the things that the board said they would like to see is kind of an indicator of when these packages were essentially put into process. And so we've listed each one of them with the language that was adopted by the board and with the date.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I think people can kind of see how long some of these have been in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then in conversation, if it becomes an issue, one of the things that we'll elaborate on is that this date, this capture in time, is when the board actually adopted the language. We'll talk about all the work and effort that went into the regulatory package prior to that, if it comes up in conversation. But this was the best date to choose for a starting point.
Thank you. I think it's good. Can we look at all of them?
Yep.
Yeah, we changed that too. It was adopted. That's good.
Is the date accurate for adoption of the discipline guidelines for 2019? It feels like it was earlier than that.
So that's where I was saying I'd like to be able to just reserve that right in conversation to talk about how long the process was before it was considered the language adopted by the board, because there are some instances where
Right,
there were multiple amendments over
Right,
time.
right,
So,
right. Before we could get to final adoption.
right.
Right.
So the date is accurate, but again, there's a backstory behind it.
Thank you.
Okay.
For 2138, updating to approved effective. It just doesn't show.
One of the other changes that we made that Brooke is here highlighting on the screen, and we talked about a little bit yesterday, was the 2138 regulations package and when it went into effect, and it went into effect just a week ago. That one was effective upon filing. They considered it an OAL allowed for an emergent posting, where normally regulations are posted quarterly. And so this particular regulation was approved upon filing. So as soon as it was approved, the actual regulation went into effect. So are we down to the tables? Okay. The addition, oh, go ahead.
Did you insert a paragraph about clear, number 5?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
Here.
Thank you.
And then we also did it here under this bullet as well.
Perfect, thanks.
So for here, I know that FSBPT was watching from afar yesterday and proactively provided us some of the data. We're still waiting for Dr. Dominguez's participation for those to incorporate in the chart, but we'll incorporate those as well. No, not for your request. We made the request on your behalf.
So did you add in other task force and committees?
No, I think we'll do it all at one time.
I see. Thank you.
The next topic of conversation, I believe, page 24 of 94. We added a line that indicated the implementation of Breeze and when we started accepting online applications through that portal. So. And again, you'll see some of the breaks here, like application survey result is stretched across 2 pages. Part of the formatting and style guide will make sure that that doesn't happen. Everything will be start anew on a fresh page. The next one, okay. The next one I have is page 29 of 94. We've changed the name of the surveys that we are given as part of our outreach to physical therapy education outreach surveys, parens, student and faculty. And then we did quantify the number of surveys that were collected for that percentage.
Nice.
So going down to page 39 and 40 under licensing program, the board's performance targets expectations for its licensing program. Ms. Conley went through and changed some of the charting to eliminate anything that was extraneous, that was nonsensical or not necessary, and did rewrite the narrative, I think, in a way that explains much better how it would work. Sarah, if you want to.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so yes, so we worked the application processing information, hopefully to address the concerns from yesterday. A lot of it's just simplifying the information that was there. identifying just the targets for what we do have targets for complete applications. And then we went back to using a chart that was provided by the committee, and it has the application types with the combined processing time. I'm sorry, I've gone beyond.
Yeah,
I'm
go
on
to
the next chart, Brooke.
Yeah.
Can you go down a little bit? We provided the processing time for both incomplete and complete applications because as we discussed yesterday, most of the applications that are received are incomplete. And so that's shown in the new charts, and they are broken up by PT and PTA. I think I'll give you a moment to take a look at that since it's new, and then
Yeah.
let
Sarah,
me know.
can you walk us through the columns? It's difficult
Yes.
to read.
Okay. So this is the chart that was provided by the committee, and you have the first column is the application type.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole chart is for physical therapists, and then we broke it down by application type for us, which is a U.S. grad or a foreign grad, and whether or not they're an exam applicant or an endorsement applicant. Then we have the number of applications received. I included just the total. I don't have the breakdown by the application type in that column. I do have the number of each application approved for each type, and then also the total, and that's the approved issued column. The next column is closed. This was not on the chart from yesterday. These are the applications that were not issued a license. So we received them, and then they didn't complete the requirements. In all of cases, they didn't complete the requirements, and they either expired or we closed the application. And then we don't have the pending application data, which is common. Most boards don't have that information. We don't track the number that we have pending at the conclusion of each year. And then as I just discussed, instead of separating the complete and incomplete for processing time, they're now combined into a total processing time at the final column.
Total processing time.
So all of the applications received in fiscal year 18-19 for, let's say, a U.S. exam application, which is that first row, would be 129 days. That's our average processing time.
So I think it actually makes it much clearer and especially when Sarah says we didn't make our 90-day goal, right? So that very first one at 129 days indicates being outside of that 90-day goal. And this is one, again, where I'm confident that the 90-day goal was an arbitrary number that we set as something to strive for, right? With something that we thought we would be able to do. Not having accounted for something like fixed date testing, right? Because in that 129 days as an average, that includes anybody who may have failed the examination for their first attempt and now has to wait a total of 90 days to take it a second time. And that skews this average out quite a bit. And when I say I'm confident in being able to have those conversations with staffers and committee members that even at 129 days, and this data being captured for a fiscal year where a lot of our changes hadn't kicked in quite yet, even at 129 out of the 90, I think is still a pretty good number, right? When we're talking about applicants who are complaining about how long the process takes, you often hear numbers much higher than 120 days. So
Yeah, well, I'm thinking you can get an applicant who applies way in advance. So that's going to skew that number. Or you can get an applicant who's going to apply 30 to 45 days before they take the exam. And that's going to make that number that big. So I think maybe in the future, we just can discern what we really want to consider a target, because you and staff are doing much better than that. You're processing these things as they come in. You're at the will of the applicant who sends it in when they send it in, right?
yeah,
Can I just add something? So The performance, the targets are based on a complete application. So we're kind
Mhm.
of back to that discussion. So if we we want to meet that 90 days. If we get an application that they've already taken their exams, they've completed every requirement, that's our goal is to issue our license in 90 days. Oftentimes it's much sooner, but we just account for data entry and review and all of the things that go into that process. So anything like when we're kind of talking about like exams, needing to take them or needing to submit any additional like education verification if they haven't graduated yet, that would be considered an incomplete application. And so if you're looking at reporting performance measures, those would not count
Mhm.
towards our 90-day goal because it was not complete upon
Yeah.
our review.
Mhm.
So we wouldn't have to meet, so we're not required to meet the expectation of a complete application processing time if the application is incomplete.
What about the US exam? You're looking just at complete exams as well?
It would be a complete application.
I
I think
mean,
that's
complete
kind of
application?
that's kind of tricky part about looking at this is that we're not right with the data we have currently and how we track our processing times, separating out complete and incomplete. We don't have that right now. So we just have our total processing
It's all
time
together.
together.
Because it seems to me, in my limited experience, that when an applicant has everything lined up, they take the NPTE Cal Law, they pass it, you get the results, the license is issued. So that's based on a complete application, right? When their
Yeah.
scores come in and everything else, all the requirements are met,
By the time if we
you're not
get-
taking 129 days. You're getting it out relatively soon.
Well, upon the last deficiency.
That's
So
right,
our
that's right.
target is 90 days, like if it's when we get it to review. So when the analyst gets it and they to review the application and everything's complete and they can issue the license right at that first contact, that's our 90-day goal. Anything beyond anything that's not met or complete at that time, then it would be considered incomplete.
So one of the things to kind of keep in mind about this template chart, again, is the template chart was written department-wide
Yes.
to account for processes that any board or bureau might have. And so you do have those, the boards rely on kind of a two-step process where it's application for examination, and then that moves into an application for licensure and that kind of thing. Where we don't have that process, we lose some of those identification points that the other boards absolutely have to have because of their process. And it makes our data a little bit muddy. With some of the recent changes that have been made moving forward. So, this time next sunset, or even in the materials that you're going to see over the next, few quarters, we're able now to really calculate the data of once the application was received by the board and the time difference to when the license was issued. Right. And so we're not hung up on deficient or complete application. For the purposes of conversation with staffers and committee members, the highest point of education will be the fixed date testing schedule, because that's the greatest contributor to a long duration of time in the application. One is if you're a new applicant having to sit for that, you're going to have to sit until it's available. And you could apply 90 days out. You could apply 45 days out. You could also apply 10 days out from an exam, not be eligible for that exam, and now it's more than 90 days. You have to wait until the next exam is available. And then the other question is, or the other point to make during that conversation is, should an applicant fail the exam and have to reschedule to take a second attempt, that statistic also skews this number. And that's a huge number because it's only given every 90 days.
If there was a way to record time from the initial application, the initial application received, complete or incomplete, and then timing to complete application completed,
License issued,
and then right,
which we have now.
Yeah.
And we'll be using for structures
right,
moving forward.
right.
So from beginning to end, the total time? Or
But
including the
but including the break even.
okay, so that's we are working on
Yeah,
collecting
yeah.
that, yeah.
I wonder if we could add just under received, incomplete and complete applications. just a parens there, because that, just that by itself will help, I think, to explain why it takes, maybe, I mean, that gets me to a much better place about why these numbers are skewed so far.
And that's one thing in the narrative above, I'm sorry we skipped over it, but I know you had discussed that yesterday
Mhm.
about identifying that the reason for the longer processing time is because so many of them are incomplete. That is in the narrative
Yeah.
For 18.
Good.
Sarah, on that same note, under closed, what falls under the closed column?
So those are applications that are incomplete by the expiration date. So an applicant has 1 year to complete their application. And if they didn't complete their exam successfully, or they didn't provide fingerprints or their education verification, and they didn't meet any of the application requirements, then we would close the application and they would need to reapply.
And so they're not approved though, right?
Exactly, yes.
Can that be added under, in parentheses, underneath closed, like not approved?
Or expired
Or
application.
Because when I see closed, I get a completely different
Yeah.
thought about it.
Mhm.
So
A clarifying.
to me, now that the way you said it, if it said not approved, that makes better sense than
Okay.
closed or
Yeah.
expired,
expired.
or something.
Should
Anything other than approved is what that category is.
should the closed and the approved be equal to the number received?
So that is mentioned in a response to question 19, because that is a question that they included.
Uh-huh.
You know, is your pending applications exceeding your completed applications? And while the number of applications that are processed in one fiscal year are not going to equate to the number received, because they're like, if you could receive an application
Right.
June
Across
and it's not
fiscal
gonna be
years.
processed, exactly.
Right. Okay.
But if
Yep.
you look at our numbers, they're consistent. So we are processing about as much as we're bringing in each fiscal year, even though they're not the same applications.
I think one of my concerns is just that, you know, the Joint Committee and the public know that your staff is issuing licenses upon complete applications.
Mhm.
This doesn't show that, and we know it, but I just, you know, want it to be clear that you get the credit for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We do touch on it in the narrative above.
Mm-hmm.
Even the last closing sentence is the PTPC makes every effort to assist applicants resolve application deficiencies and issue a license as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And to your point, when all deficiencies have been met,
Yeah.
some of those licenses are being issued just as part of the automated process, right? It goes to the checklist, and we were awaiting a score for the jurisprudence exam. And as soon as the interface was able to input that score and the score met the criteria, without any analyst intervention, just through the automated process, that license could be issued the next day.
Mm-hmm. Which is fantastic.
And I think too, part of this is reporting on past data. Even though it's 2021, we're constantly making changes. And then also staffing. We've had a lot of fluctuations and adding staff recently, and reassignments for like COVID tracking and things like that. And so that's all reflected in our data. I think as we move forward, we'll be able to see some of the impact, the positive impact, in some of those changes that we've been making, and making sure we have the right resource, the appropriate number of resources for processing applications.
Yeah.
So I think it'll come up. We'll be able to see it just,
Yeah. Even in the way you report it next time will be probably
and
much more
hopefully
clear.
like at board meetings, like Jason was saying, we'll be able to see some of that.
And we go into it in further detail under question 19, where we describe, you know, what we perceive as kind of increases or decreases in the average times and why.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sarah has reworked this language also, I think, to simplify things a little bit more. If you bump that font up once, how bad will it get? Okay. I just want to make it readable for you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a lot more clear. Thanks for writing that up, Sarah.
Hold. About the middle of the paragraph, the PTB's, right now it's at the very top of the screen. The PTBC's application process is dependent on outside processes such as education verification, examinations, and fingerprinting. And maybe here indicate exam date availability.
Just the clarification, so education verification, fixed date test examinations, bring the, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and fingerprinting. Thank you for that.
Test and examinations. It reads fixed date test examinations.
No, where is that?
Oh, yeah, Brooke was just getting.
Okay.
Fixed date examinations.
I like how you followed up the paragraph with another paragraph talking about outreach to help mitigate the
That
issues.
has been, thank you for bringing that up. That we've really seen that as a positive, have a positive impact on our processes. Having an educated applicant, knowing what they're getting into, what to expect, really makes a difference on our end.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope to continue that and increase those efforts.
We've received feedback even from directors of programs how much they appreciate us doing that for them. They've seen less critique or complaining, if you will, or even a need or assistance for the application process from the educational program itself. So.
Looks good, Sarah.
Yeah. Thanks for the rework.
So hold up. So what you guys do is you have somebody who will reach out to the new applicants and kind of guide them along the way and what to expect?
Yes, so that's what April coordinates. So
That's
she
friggin'
coordinates with
amazing.
all of the schools. And then we have Yura, our lead analyst, has been delivering the presentations and helping with the workshops as myself. So it's a team effort. And we go through the application process with the applicants and get them ready to apply. And it's been great. And then also after that, we do have the Yura is the point of contact for the schools. So if there's any follow-up from the program directors or anything like that, we do have a single point of contact. They can reach out for any follow-up questions. And then we really try to be available to the applicants during the application process. That's why, as amazing as Breeze is and the online systems, we really think it's important to provide people and that support, because no matter how awesome your automated system is, people still like that reassurance of that conversation, that phone call, just to make sure everything's good or help if something doesn't go according to plan or whatever it may be. So
Was this always in here when we were working on this? No? Did you guys just add this?
This was just it was reworked, but
Okay.
for the outreach side of it, we try to be as flexible with educational programs as possible, right? It's kind of hard. There's nothing in CAPTI's curriculum really that mandates that the programs in California allow us to come in and say anything, right? So just kind of through word of mouth and a few good examples, we've spread from what was typically 5 or 6 schools now to being, almost every program at this point, over 80%. And as an example, for some of those schools, we might go in very early into their cohort and just do a presentation on the board, why it exists, what professional regulation entails, laws, ethics, that kind of thing. But save the application process and come back in their, the third year of their program or towards the end of their cohort, and then do the application demonstration, and then even provide kind of follow-up to any kind of questions that may have come from the first. So we'll whatever they need. If we have to do both presentations in a single day or, you know, in the beginning of the cohort and then one towards the end, we can do that too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yes. Oh my
It's
gosh.
win-win, you know, it's
Yes.
win for the applicants because they're getting guidance, education before they even apply. And it's win for our staff, hopefully, less question. Yeah,
And I think too, also that introduction to the board itself, to know that you're not just getting that first introduction when you have to renew your license, or, you know, it's getting that introduction. This is who we are. This is what we do. And the students seem very interested in that.
mm-hmm,
And it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that's what the board did.
yeah.
So it's good.
And
I-
so over the pandemic, you continued these outreach efforts.
We did.
Yes,
It
virtually.
was a little bit more difficult to do in a WebEx or Zoom platform. And there were, you know, we had hiccups and speed bumps where, you know, due to IT issues, it was almost a one-way form of communication. Like I could see them or they could see me, but I couldn't see them. So I was talking to a dry erase screen or, you know, or something just blank. But it's just not the same as the in-person engagement and getting, you know, the applicants to participate through the presentation, encouraging them to ask the questions, even if they think they're silly or don't make sense. And when you get into a Zoom platform, people become a little bit more hesitant to make those leaps. And so we lose a little bit of the engagement, but the online platform has still been very successful.
Mm-hmm.
We can still feel the effects and how good the applications are coming in, how complete. The quality has definitely improved.
I do have a couple numbers that were not included in the chart. Should I go ahead and include them now, or is that
Down below in 20, Or up-
in number 18?
18?
Yeah, I have 3 numbers I need to add in for closed applications. Can we do that now? Or?
Sure.
Okay. So Brooke, on fiscal year 18-19, closed applications total, it's 111. And then for 19-20, it's 80. And 2021 is 104. Thank you for doing that. And then if concludes this review, I just want to say thank you for your patience with working through this. Obviously, providing all of that data yesterday with the didn't meet the intent of trying to increase transparency because it muddied the waters a bit. So I'm excited to report the updated information and what we're working on and the progress for our program, and because that's what we want to do, is just make sure our stakeholders are informed. So so thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
There's huge benefit to the live presentation. We know. Are we working on a PowerPoint presentation, something that's based on this for say the endorsement applicants, to help them understand process a little bit better? Because we can't have them all in a classroom.
We haven't done one specifically for endorsement. That's a great idea. We do have, you know, canned presentations because we've had situations where we had to reschedule or whatnot, and we sent something to a particular, you know, school director so they could do it when it was convenient for them.
Right.
But developing one for endorsement is certainly something that we could do.
We definitely have those plans
Good,
in
good.
the works for doing potentially even videos to walk people through the
Yeah,
different processes.
we have the tutorials that we're looking at, and that would be helpful. But we have so much, you know, presentation material that we can turn around and just tailor towards in the meantime too.
Oh yes, yeah. So definitely.
Thinking of the numerous video presentations that board members have to get to view, and as part of the requirements.
Yeah.
All that training.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we're at 10:30, and I think we can muscle through. Does anyone need a break or?
Ms. McMillian?
Let's muscle through.
Okay.
The next item of review that I want to bring to the board's attention is a little bit further down, and it has to do with the criminal conviction denials, and we have added the fourth column. And so instead of just indicating denied, appealed, and issued probationary, we've done the simple math just to kind of call out ultimately the number of people that actually get denied. So, and thank you for the creation of the term initially denied. I think that helps quite a bit. Moving down to page 56, we're into the continuing competency section, and under section C, we talked about the consequences for failing a CE audit and the range. And so we've added additional narrative. Most failed audits result in the issuance of a citation. So we'll take S off of that. The citation includes an order of abatement that requires the licensee to fulfill their continuing competence requirements within a reasonable amount of time. Failure to comply with that order may result in further discipline.
Nice.
And so we were talking about those folks that were considered fails in the audits. Are there still 90 people out there that got away with not having to do their continuing competency? And no, they didn't. So. Further down, to try and contrast the number of 1,462 and better define it, instead of saying over the last 4 years, we identified the fiscal years that number actually comes from, and then eliminated some of the language to just kind of clean it up a little bit and essentially say that 1492 is only attributed to those fiscal years because of COVID-19 and the waiver of continuing competency.
Yeah, I do think that's cleaner.
Right. Moving down through the enforcement program. We went through the charts based on the performance measures and the bulletized explanations underneath each chart. And we thought a good point of clarity for everyone is, we said 270 cases were closed within 90 days. The second line read cases were closed within 1 year, but that didn't really say 91 to a year, right? And so I think that brings clarity. That 426 was incorrect. 156 is the actual number. And then we used that same methodology in the charts below just by adding the 91 days to a year for clarification.
Nice. We're doing good. Knock on wood.
My speed reading class was so long ago.
We did add language. I'm on section 7 on page 82, and that is addressing the online practice issues. And yesterday in conversation, we talked about telehealth and how that plays out for physical therapists. And that essentially telehealth is not a new practice, it's just a new tool that can be used in practice. So the language reads, pursuant to Business Professions Code section 2290.5, all licenses issued under Division 2 may utilize telehealth. Telehealth is seen as a tool in practice, not a separate form of practice. There are no legal prohibitions to using technology in the practice of physical therapy as long as the practice is done by a licensed physical therapist and complies with the Physical Therapy Practice Act and the California Code of Regulations.
Thank you.
That's great. Is telehealth allowed by physical therapist assistants?
Under the supervision of a PT.
Okay.
Under current issues, number 64, we just made an edit. Actually, I didn't finish the thought though, which will be known as the 6th edition. And then we'll go on to say dash guidelines for issuing citations and imposing discipline. And that completes the review from yesterday's work.
Great job, staff, after hours. Thank you very much. Thank you, members, for all of your input. And so what we did today, the sections that we did today, you'll just tighten those up.
Mhm.
And so what do you need from the board today?
So I think where we are today, even with the amendments that were made today, we made them in real time so you could see them. So a motion today, adopting the report as amended today and yesterday, and delegating to the executive officer and staff to make any non-substantive changes such as formatting, grammar, style, that kind of thing. The motion itself is at the bottom of the briefing paper. Feel free to edit it as you like.
So I move to adopt the proposed 2021 Sunset Review Report as revised, delegate to the board president the authority to review and proof the revised version, and authorize the executive officer to make any non-substantive changes to the 2021 Sunset Review Report and submit the report to the legislature.
I will second.
So we have a motion by myself and a second by Dr. Dominguez. Any further board discussion? Any public comment? Staff comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Elise Ribbon-Amen.
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby. Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
4-0. Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Okay.
I didn't take a Tylenol or an ibuprofen or anything, and all of a sudden I do not have a headache.
Okay, I think it is a good time for a break. It's 10:43. Let's be back at 10:55 and get back on record to get this work done. What do you think? Okay?
I'm not sitting next to you anymore.
Page 10.
Whatever you put out, all of a sudden I want it.
Get it. April safely. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're back on record. It's 10:57. We are going to begin with agenda item number 16, which is the president's report and our meeting calendar. We're at the end of 2021. You can see in the agenda materials that the calendar is included. And we're at the end, but are there any board member comments, questions, concerns? Any comments, questions, concerns from staff or from you, Jason?
We just wanted to note we did make some notations and added some dates for the association since the last meeting. The only thing on the calendar, one, is I just want to confirm with the members that are here today that these dates still work for them.
Are you talking about 2022?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. Oh, for 2021, no, nothing really to add.
okay. Yeah, so 2022 dates. Let's have everyone look at their calendar. So especially March 23rd and 24th, correct?
Correct.
Those dates do work for me. If anyone has,
And I'm afraid at this point, we still have to leave it as a to be determined, but the intent is Southern California.
okay.
We have a couple logistical issues to kind of have to work out. Best case scenario is we will be in Southern California live in person. Worst case scenario is we'll be back here in Sacramento. And I think by then we'll be able to also provide a Webex component to that March meeting.
I don't have an issue with any of those dates. Any other members seeing anything that doesn't fit?
One, on the 2022 calendar, just one double confirmation, if you will, just to bring your attention to December. If 8th and 9th still works, but also if the board wanted to consider maybe 1st and 2nd. Regarding holidays and that kind of thing, if there were issues.
When do we adopt this calendar? Today?
We do. We would always have the room to make amendments to it based on, you know, issues as they might arise, but I would like to adopt it today.
What say you, Dr. Drummer?
It's the schedule.
Okay. Dr. Dominguez?
Yeah, so I technically term out at the end of June, but if I'm still around, no problems with the dates. I'd be fine to the December point, the first, second, or the 8th, 9th. Either way. I usually, my teaching load in the falls is Monday to Wednesday.
Ms. McMillian?
I'm fine. I'm fine with
All good? Those of us who are here, it's all good. Mr. Kaiser?
Stay with 8 or 9?
Does anyone have a preference for early December versus second week in December?
I think I prefer the cushion week after Thanksgiving
Okay.
rather than, yeah.
So we'll leave it as is, and then do I hear a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt the proposed 21-22 calendar. I'm sorry, 22-23 calendar.
I think it's just 22.
It's just 22.
Then it's because I'm thinking
Fiscal
fiscal
year.
years. Never mind. The proposed calendar for 2022.
I'll second.
Motion from Dr. Drummer to adopt the 2022 calendar and a second by Dr. Dominguez. Any further board discussion? And do we have any public comment on the calendar? A roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benayemen,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby. Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
Thank you.
Are we no longer using the big screen? Just to clarify.
I have my notes on here for the.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are no longer using the big screen. All right. Agenda item 17 is rulemaking.
So every year we submit a rulemaking calendar to the Office of Administrative Law, and this shows our anticipated regulatory workload for the year. If you look specifically at the calendar, Schedule A addresses any proposed regulations implementing statutes enacted during the year of 2021. There are none that the board is addressing this year. Schedule B, we show proposed regulations implementing statutes enacted prior to the year 2021. And on here, we have our 4 rulemaking packages that are currently in process that we've been talking about today. We have the coursework tool, the disciplinary guidelines, the clinical service requirements for foreign educated applicants, and of course, our retired license status. We also have included our continuing competency regulations, which we will be working on hopefully this year. The only addition to the rulemaking calendar is addressing the retired license administrative fee, and that would be shown, we'll be making those changes in CCR sections 1399.50 and 1399.52. We will be including those in the rulemaking package for the retired license regulation. So the board will be seeing proposed language showing that administrative fee for the retired license status, the actual administrative fee to process that retired license application.
Is that the one on Schedule B that reads subject fees?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, that will be part of the rulemaking package for retired license. So the retired license status will include the proposed language that's already been adopted by the board, and then also the section 1399.5 1 and 2, I believe, that will show the $100 administrative fee for the retired license status.
Okay.
Yeah, so the distinction is they're the same. It's a single package, but because it affects 2 different codes, one that's the authority for the retirement and the application process, but because the way the code is structured, fees are in a different section, and so we're just adding that new section so that we can account for that.
Is it protocol to just label it fees? That's what the legislature looks for? Or?
In the code, it's labeled fees because it includes all of the board's fees.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else, Brooke?
No, I think that covered it. Does the board have any questions on the rulemaking calendar?
So these are the schedules. When do you submit these?
Usually they go to OAL the 2nd week of January.
And then at our next meeting, we start seeing the little arrows, the little
Correct.
chart with the arrows.
Yeah, so the report here today is really just about the calendar we're sending to AL, which is anticipatory, right? They use it to justify staffing because they're trying to estimate the volume of regulations they might be receiving from all of the state. But no, at the next meeting, you'll have a much more comprehensive report on the status of regulations.
Yeah, it looks like what we usually,
What you would usually see.
what we usually see. Okay.
This was because it's a time constraint, we have to get this by the 2nd week of January. We brought it to you today.
Thank you. Board member questions, concerns, discussion? Any public or staff comment? Okay. Thank you, Brooke. Agenda item 18, waivers.
So for, I need a motion to adopt the rulemaking
Oh,
calendar
I'm
as you
sorry
read
about
today.
that. Okay.
And there's a
problem.
suggested motion on page 12 of the meeting materials.
Sorry about that.
I make a motion to adopt the 2022 rulemaking calendar as required by government code. Government code.
Motion by Ms. McMillan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Drummer. Any further board discussion? Any public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benayaman,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby. Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
Thank you, Brooke. Okay, now agenda item 18, waivers.
So as Jason was talking about in the sunset report, there were a few additional waiver extensions since our last meeting. DCA Waiver 21-194 is the ninth extension of the continuing competency or continuing education. And this addresses waiving continuing competency renewal requirements whose license expired between March 31st, 2021 and October 31st, 2020 and October 31st, 2021. And licensees must complete their continuing competency requirements by January 31st, 2022. DCA Waiver 21-200 is the fifth extension, which temporarily allows licensees to reinstate an inactive or retired license without paying fees or completing continuing competency. And this order terminates on January 1st, 2022.
January 1st, 2022.
Correct.
Which extension did you say this is?
This is the 21-200. It's the fifth extension.
Fifth extension. Okay. Thank you.
And DCA 21-202, reinstatement of, temporarily waives the requirement for an in-person patient examination and evaluation. And this one has been extended 8 times and now terminates on December 31st. And the last extension is DCA Waiver DCA 21-197, and this is the 7th extension, and it temporarily waives PT and PTA applicants whose applications are deemed denied without prejudice between October 1st and October 31st. And this is due to the applicant failing to take and pass an examination prescribed by the board.
So this one's expiring?
It expired October 31st.
31st.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Board member comments, questions, concerns about waivers? Public comment? Okay. Staff comment?
Just kind of a reminder, while the majority of the waivers that affect this board have expired or will expire before the end of the year, the remnants of those will be around with us for quite some time. When you think about our ability to audit continuing competency and making a decision point of when to start doing that, it's a little far out in the future. The examination extension, while it expires on October 31st, if their application would have expired mid-October, they now have an additional period of time that we have to keep that application open. So the waivers are starting to go away in the wind down, but some of the workload that came from them will have probably to the better part of the midway next year.
Mm. Okay. We are rolling right along. Let's start agenda item number 20, which is discussion and possible board action for the increase in the exempt level of the executive officer. We've had some discussion as far as sunset goes already this morning. We do have supplementary materials that were given to us. And again, I do want to thank staff for really doing a good job putting together something so comprehensive. Timeline as well as the resources in the back. Thank you so very much for doing that. I think I just want to reiterate what I've said earlier about this being about us as a board not being in the right classification. I've heard, in the past from previous DCA leadership that, we don't want to quote unquote grow government. We're not growing government. We're already there and we just haven't been classified appropriately. So I don't know if board members have had a chance to kind of look through the timeline. It looks to me like, there was a denial initially in May of 2017, which means that we actually asked either at the later part of 2016 or beginning of 17. So this is going on our 5th year now of asking. We have established a committee for this particular issue. Once the pandemic hit, we were pretty much told that we shouldn't ask again until things settled down a little. I think it was even, there was uncertainty at that time, and there was concern about, budgetary concerns, but we're not in that position. I think we're in a good position to maybe rile this up again and get our efforts going again to see if we can be classified where we're supposed to be. So for a long time we were at O, and now we're at N. We belong at L. If I can just pull up and call your attention to the lovely chart that staff included. It's toward the back, and this was always one of my favorite charts, and that is Table 1. DCA Healing Arts Boards. This is where we can actually see how we compare to similar size boards, and where they're classified and where we're classified. The category. And so I think at this point, Jason, I want to invite you to say what you'd like to about this.
Sure. So just a couple points about what you've already provided. The last request that this board made was in September of 19. In March of 2020, at essentially the very beginning of the global pandemic, California identified a potential financial crisis. And we did receive notification in response to the September request that the request was denied due to financial concerns in the whole of the state of California, but to please consider resubmitting the request once the financial crisis was alleviated. So the global pandemic absolutely, contributing to what we projected might cause a financial crisis. The benefit now of, a year and a half gone by, we realize that the financial crisis that we anticipated actually never happened. California is actually sitting in a surplus, and we had unprecedented revenues based on taxation for that period of time, given the circumstances. So I guess I would just, I'd make the point that this board's familiar with this particular package. It's just a matter of kind of updating the data and resubmitting it based on the recommendation that CalHR made in their denial. Just please resubmit once the fiscal crisis has been alleviated. So I too think that the table that's on the screen right now is beneficial in a sense that it provides justification to just about anybody who looks at it, whether it's us and staff or board members, but anybody else that might be interested in this conversation of why this request is being made. You can see some of our closest Venuses and the comparatives between them, and where we have greater scope of responsibility, or larger number of staff, or even a larger licensing population, or a much more complex profession to regulate, those kind of things. This chart kind of helps map that out.
And I do want to say that when DCA came under the new leadership of Director Kirchmeier, this was very much on her radar, and she did have a meeting back then that we've talked about at past board meetings. and Lila Marashidi was there as well. And they very much supported us, and they're very aware of the issues. And so I just want to thank DCA and agency for their support. And Director Kirchmeier, did facilitate and encourage us and help bring our package forward. It was denied at that time, so that's the denial that Jason is referring to. But we do have their support, so I think the timing is good if board members agree to maybe reconvene the subcommittee, or if that's not necessary, just move forward with submitting the package.
So one of the things that staff and I were going to ask today is the subcommittee as it stands right now is down to one member. We lost another member. So one, if the board president would like to appoint a second member of that committee if it's continued. Two is that just the package that you have in front of you basically is the initial submittal to DCA's HR to start the process.
Okay.
So there may be, there are additional steps in that process once we start it. It's just a matter of, would the board like to start that process as a result of today's meeting?
Yes. Start the process.
Ms. McMillian says yes. Dr. Drummer? Yeah. Dr. Dominguez,
I'm not sure what I'm saying, yes or no.
would you like to start the process to resubmit this package again to get us where we need to be as far as
Yes.
level? Okay. Yes.
Understood. So the package of the materials that you have in front of you, we believe are, very comprehensive. You've reviewed them
Very.
fourth and now a fifth time. They have been updated with more current information, and then even some new narrative that explains the appointment of the executive officer and those kind of things. So we will take that. We'll ask the board president if she wouldn't mind drafting a cover memo for it when we submit it to DCA's HR personnel officer, Nicole Lee. And once we receive that, we will move the package forward.
Okay. I'll work with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, any other further board comment or discussion?
In the agenda book that indicates that there is an action requested and a motion from the board. Is that necessary or not at this point?
I'll refer to council. I mean, I think it's stronger with a motion and an option, but I'm not sure.
I do think that would that taking a formal action would be warranted here in terms of the board making the decision to move the package forward. So I would recommend a motion.
And to clarify, it was Cal HR who suggested we resubmit at a later date.
That's correct.
As requested by Cal HR, I move to request support of DCA, the Office of Human Resources, to work with the PTBC staff and appropriate agencies in obtaining exempt level change that is appropriate to the PTBC's EO position allocation and organization structure.
I second.
Motion by Dr. Drummer and a second by Ms. McMillian. Any further board discussion? Any public comment?
Ms. Constancio.
Can't hear you.
If you can come up to the dais and.
Is it possible to include level change?
In the motion?
Yeah, in the motion. I just
Okay.
don't
It
want
was
to have
read.
that.
It's in there.
It was read. I read what
Okay, you
was,
Mhm.
I
You
read
read
the
it
proposed
verbatim.
language.
Yeah.
Can- Can we
The
read
end
it
of the
back?
second, the end of the second line.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
The only addition that I made to the motion was, as per request of Cal HR, I move.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't hear it right.
I just didn't wanna go on this thing where, okay, are we doing
Mhm.
a research or study? We're good. Thank you.
Exactly, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Drummond.
Any other public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Van Amen,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby. Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
I truly hope this is the last word that I have to say on this matter. Aye.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
All right. It is 11:24. I do think we can move on with agenda item number 21, which are board member elections. We do have some board members who are not present today. Do you have any information for us, Mr. Kaiser?
I do. I have discussed the possibility of the elections with each of the 3 members that are not in attendance today. And so should their names come up in nominations, I have what they will and will not do, and I can speak on their behalf.
Oh. Okay, so I know there's protocol to this and you might need to help me out, council. However, we'll start with president. And I would just like to say that I've learned so much being president. I still continue to learn. It is more work than being a board member, but it's not tons of work. Sometimes I think I make more work than I need to. I don't know, maybe Jason thinks I don't make enough. But I say this in encouraging anyone who would like to just give it a go and give it a shot and, you know, see how this might play out for you. So I will nominate Ms. McMillian.
No.
Really?
I thought I'd go there, just give it a shot.
Thank you, Madam President, for putting the whole position in context. I would like to nominate President Rabina Amen.
I second.
I'll second the nomination.
I will accept.
Yes.
I would like to nominate Dr. Drummer.
Given the uncertainty of the length of my time on the board remaining, I will have to decline that nomination. Thank you.
If the time wasn't an issue, would you accept the nomination?
I don't know.
There is a grace period.
There is.
Mm-hmm.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to impede on the progress that you've made and the progress that I anticipate you continuing to make in the position.
I'm willing to be your number one consultant. If you would like to give this a try and experience it, I'm here to support you.
Having declined the nomination, I'll let that stand.
He's polite.
Okay. I was trying.
I can be.
You know, at our last meeting, we did, I thank you, Ms. McMillian, for jumping in on the subcommittee right away when we asked for volunteers. I thank you for that. And I thank you also, Dr. Dominguez, for allowing us to twist your arm. And you did accept that twist very swiftly, and I thank you. And so if I may twist your arm, I'd like to nominate you for president.
Thank you. I'm quite flattered that your confidence in me, but similar to the concerns or the hesitations Dr. Drummer expressed, I'm likely in the same position. And my arm is broken, actually. It's not twisted, it's broken at this point. And I'm of the opinion that the queen is not dead. Long live the queen. So I thank you.
Okay,
I will decline.
okay.
Queen is not dead because she ate princess bread.
Are there any other nominations for any members not present for the position of president? Hearing none.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Dominguez for myself to be considered for president. And we have a second by Ms. McMillian. And so any further board discussion? And any public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Renee Ament,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby, Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong, Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez,
Aye.
Daniel Drummer,
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin, Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian,
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
Thank you. And for vice president, any nominations?
Yes, I make a nomination for Dr. Daniel Drummer for vice president.
Similar to previous reasons, I will decline at this point.
Can you repeat what you said previously? I forgot.
Could somebody read that back?
I nominate Dr. Jesus Dominguez for vice president.
Again, Doctor, I just gave you an honorary doctorate, Dr. McMillian. For the same reasons as prior, again, very flattered and appreciative, but I would have to decline.
I nominate Ms. McMillian.
And I would second that right there.
Oh, what the hell?
Third.
What is this?
Experience. That's what it
It
is.
is,
It's,
it is.
it's experience.
So here's the thing, you're a little more in the loop. There are many times that the president includes the vice president on communications, on looking at the agenda. I think, if in the event the president can't fulfill her duties, that's when you would step in as vice president.
Oh my God, pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I accept.
Okay, thank you. And you are a public member, which is great to have as, either president or vice president. Any other nominations, maybe for those who aren't here?
Madam President, I would have suggested the current vice president, just to give us a licensee and a professional, and a public member.
Mhm.
But I think this makeup is nice.
Mhm.
So I would not.
Okay. Any nominations from either of you and people who aren't here? Okay. And any public comment? And a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Renee Ament,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby, Katarina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong, Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez,
Aye.
Daniel Drummer,
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin, Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian,
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
Thank you.
Can we confirm the second on that motion? It was
Dr. Dominguez?
Dominguez, thank you.
FSBPT delegate in the nominations. Our current delegate was Mr. Irvin.
Mhm.
And so nominations for delegate for 2022.
I would nominate Dr. Armstrong.
Second.
We have a motion for Dr. Armstrong for FSBPT delegate by Dr. Drummer and a second by Ms. McMillian. And any other nominations?
Can we clarify with Mr. Kaiser as to whether or not she has indicated
I was waiting for the opportunity. So speaking on behalf of Dr. Armstrong, she would deny the nomination.
Oh.
I nominate Katerina Ellaby.
Second.
Speaking for Ms. Ellaby, she would accept the nomination as delegate.
Okay.
I nominate Mr. Irvin.
I would second.
Speaking on behalf of Mr. Irvin, he would accept the nomination as delegate.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, so we have two nominees. I'm not sure how we handle that.
I think we'd, upon voting, you'd vote for your preferred candidate.
Okay. Okay. And so public comment. And so we will have, I'm not sure, a roll call vote, and we'll each say our choice.
Alicia Benaman,
Katerina Ellaby.
Katerina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez,
Jonathan Irvin.
Daniel Drummer,
Mr. Irvin.
Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian,
Katerina Ellaby.
so that's 2 votes for Katerina Ellaby and 2 votes for Jonathan Irvin.
All right, now what?
I don't think we have a successful nominee. So I think we go back to nominations.
Okay, can we have a revote? Can we?
I think we can.
Okay.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's any.
Elections, just to state this, elections, you have a little more latitude in terms of making a motion in the second. Nominations are generally handled that way.
Okay,
So I think you can do that here. We're not strictly voting on a motion here.
okay, thank you.
To provide a little more information, Mr. Irvin is relatively new to the board. As we have done as custom, a newer member is nominated to be the delegate because of the experience that it provides. Mr. Irvin did that for us this past year. I think because he's agreed to do it already, I think I would. That's why I'm in favor of him electing him to serve in that position again. And a little off topic, jumping forward, I think that the other nominee could be an excellent mentor for him as the alternate delegate. Should Dr. Armstrong?
I appreciate that. Any other board comments or discussion before we revote?
I thank Dr. Drummer for that perspective. I think I would.
Wait for your vote.
Yeah, lean towards what you shared. So
Okay,
yeah, okay. Wait for my vote.
okay. And any public comment? Okay, here we go.
Alicia Benaman,
Jonathan Irvin.
Katerina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez,
My original vote stands, so Mr. Irvin.
Daniel Drummer,
I was looking forward to another revote. To a flip. I'll vote for Mr. Irvin.
Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian,
Jonathan Irvin.
4-0. Motion carried for Jonathan Irvin for FSBPT delegate.
Okay, thank you all. And alternate delegate,
I nominate Katerina Ellaby.
Second.
we have a motion for Katerina Ellaby to be the alternate delegate by Ms. McMillian, and we have a second by Dr. Drummer. Do we have any other, or will she accept the alternate delegate?
On behalf of Ms. Ellaby, she will accept the nomination for alternate delegate.
Okay. Any other nominations?
I would nominate Dr. Armstrong.
Will Dr. Armstrong accept the nomination?
On behalf of Dr. Armstrong, she will not accept the nomination.
Okay. The motion for Katerina Ellaby was by Ms. McMillian and the second was Dr. Drummond? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I think no more nominations. Any public comment? Okay, and a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Benjamin,
Aye.
Katerina Ellaby is absent. Dale Armstrong is absent. Jesus Dominguez, Daniel Drummer,
Vote for Ms. Ellaby.
Jonathan Irvin is absent. Tanya McMillian,
Aye.
4-0, motion carried.
Thank you. Backup alternate delegate. Yeah.
Typically, what we've done in the past is just include the rest of the members alphabetically. There's no commitment to that, so that if we run down a list for an alternate delegate and you just have other life issues that would prevent you from participating, we'll just move on to the next alternate delegate, so on and so forth.
Okay. So that would be Dr. Dominguez, Dr. Drummer, Ms. McMillian, and myself.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe last year we did do alphabetical order, so I would suggest reversing to reverse alphabetical order for this year.
Okay.
Okay. Board members okay with that? So then that would be myself as backup first, and Ms. McMillian second. Dr. Drummer would be third, and Dr. Dominguez would be fourth. Does that require any action?
It
And
hasn't in the past.
Okay.
and sorry, Dr. Armstrong would be
Last.
would be the last in
Thank
that
you
list
for
then,
bringing
right?
that up. Yes, Dr. Armstrong would be after Dr. Dominguez.
Alicia, is there a reason why she wasn't on the roll call list, Dr. Armstrong?
I think every time we have a roll call vote, Brooke is calling the members who aren't here and just
Oh.
saying that they are not present.
Tanya noticed that Dr. Armstrong's name was missing from the attendance
It was.
roll call list.
My apologies. Yeah, we used an older one. Her name wasn't
okay.
included, but the roll call I've been calling yesterday and today has been included her.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for
Just
noticing that.
The printed version did not this time.
Okay. Do we have any public comment regarding backup alternate delegate? Okay. Elections are complete.
They are.
Okay. It is 11:40, and other than closed session, we have public comment on items not on the agenda. And so I think it might be a good time to just take that now. If anyone has any items that are not on the current agenda that they'd like to bring forward, please come forward. Okay. And agenda item number 24 are agenda items for future meetings. Board members have any ideas for anything that they'd like to see for a future meeting? I know that we do have kind of a running list from past meetings that we check back on regularly to see if they'll fit in.
So I just wanted to check in on that. So keep in mind, our March meeting will be a bit of a catch-up meeting. We did
Yes.
designate these 2 days to the sunset process. So in March, the board and its staff will be bringing back its statistical report, its legislative report, and the rulemaking report, all of those typical things. We also have a few presentations in the works, presentation from the DCA regulatory unit that Heather Hoganson will be providing, as well as a presentation of services by the Department of Justice's Office of the Attorney General, which our DAG liaison, Jonathan Gatchett, will be providing. So we do already have 2 proposed presentations for the March meeting. We also know that we have some reoccurring presentations that we want to bring back for 2022, but we're always eager to hear anything else that the board would like to have added to the calendar. Just one word of caution before we, the other part I would keep in mind is the next March meeting is also going to be potentially around the same time as our hearing for Sunset. And so March's meeting itself might require some portion of time dedicated, especially to Sunset, depending on how the report and feedback comes back from the BMP committee.
Do you anticipate that we'll get back to disciplinary hearings?
I do. It's one of the things that we want to do in this calendar year, but we are doing it with an eye of discretion. So part of it does depend on the respondent, the complexity of their case, but also where they're located and how time sensitive their case is. So it's not to say that there might be cases that we don't still detour and run through the Office of Administrative Hearings. We still may continue to do that, but it will be case by case and based on the respondent's circumstances.
Okay, thank you. And I think you've been, you and staff have been pretty good at looking at some of those ideas that we've brought up in the past, for this particular agenda item. And so maybe, not necessarily for March, but maybe we'll just peruse back through, like, I don't know, the last 2 years, I guess.
We definitely have a parking lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And we have at least staff and I have in mind a calendar of when we can incorporate those ideas into meetings, but we'll bring it back at the March meeting.
Thank you for being mindful of that. I appreciate it, because I think for us as board members, we say it at the time and then it's gone.
Yep.
So we appreciate you being mindful of that. Thank
We
you.
want to knock two of the big ones off the list next time around with those two presentations.
Thank you. Any public comment? Okay. I think we can check that one off. And so what we will do now, it's 11:45, we will go into lunch recess. I'm wondering if the board wants to do a working lunch, or should we enjoy lunch? Up to you.
I don't mind a working lunch.
Maybe a working lunch?
I don't mind.
Okay, we'll go into closed session and we will not reopen back into open session. We will just open to adjourn. And so thank you, everyone. It's been so nice to be back in person. Definitely can feel more participation and reading each other's body language. So this has been nice, and it's been great to have public here too. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, staff. And 11:46, we will recess.